Today's the 14th. So your quiz 2 for object-oriented programming is due the 24th. So you've got one more week for that. And then your second milestone is due in a few weeks as well. The requirements document and use case diagram, we're going to get into this today. We're going to start going over that. We've kind of covered, if you go to modules, we've kind of covered everything you need with regard to the programming aspect to get started with your project. And so we are now down in topic 6, which is UML and use case. So that's where we'll pick up today. Again, I've posted all of the video lectures that we've done for the ones before. So if you want to go back and review how to do reading and writing to text files, you can come back and check this out in module 5. Those videos are posted there. And I will do the same for what we're going to do today. This will appear here in topic 6. Okay, so go ahead and get started here in just a second. Okay. So everybody's good. Still very light on attendance, but we will proceed nonetheless. All right, so let's look at topic 6, which is UML and use case. And we're going to take a look at getting into some documentation for what we're doing. I'm going to go back here. So 3 things here with topic 6. I do give you guys access to these quizzes a little bit early. Remember, this second quiz, which is up here in topic 4, it's due February 24th, but I don't necessarily think it's a good idea to wait that long to do it. The best time to take the quiz is when the content is fresh in your mind. And so even though this quiz 3 isn't due until March 10th, I suggest that you take it as soon as we get through the entire topic outline. Okay. Same thing with the requirements document. Go ahead and get that done and knocked out as soon as we cover the content. That way it doesn't sneak up on you. Okay. All right. So let me get a quick overview of what we've got here. All right. So we're going to get started with UML, which stands for Unified Modeling Language. And UML is a series of documents and ways to document your program to benefit both the developers and the users of the program, or the clients, those that are wanting the program created. In this case, you're kind of both. But these documents really help you understand what it is that you're doing with the program. You can think of it like planning or pre-writing before you write an essay or a story or something like this. It helps you better understand how your system functions, what it's supposed to do, how the individual components of the system interact with one another. And the idea is to hopefully head off any issues that you'll have before you get into development. I mentioned, no, that was a different class. What you want to focus on with these documents is understanding how the components of your program relate to one another and how the users are going to interact with the program. That's kind of the gist of the whole thing. We're going to look at just a little bit today. We'll look at both requirements, which are things that your program needs to do, both functional and non-functional. And then we'll look at something called use case. And use cases are common in a lot of different fields, not just development or software development. They're common in any situation where you have somebody interacting with a product or interacting with a service. And use cases essentially define the way in which a particular user will use the system. Okay, that's what use cases is, or use cases are. Okay, so let's start up here. Any questions before we start? Okay. All right, so as it says, the purpose of UML is to capture really complex software in basic documents, basic diagrams. That's the idea. Something that is if you were to look at code and try to understand what the code does, that would be much more difficult than looking at a simple diagram. And so that's where this UML comes into play. And there's lots of different perspectives. There's lots of different types of these documents that help define different aspects of the software itself. Okay. So these are some types of UML diagrams. We're going to focus on use case diagrams. We will get into a lot of these others throughout the semester. The goal being to really get you exposed to this type of documentation because it's going to be common in the field. So this will give you kind of some groundwork going into that sort of thing. So let's talk about use case diagrams. So purpose up front is we need to gather requirements of the system with focus on the internal and external influences. Okay, we're talking about users and how they interact with the system. Okay, so a couple of terms that we want to focus on. First are use cases. Okay, these are individual functionalities or actions of the system. And we have actors. Actors are someone or something. It can be a person, and sometimes it can be a non-person or like an AI entity, you could say, that interacts with the system. Okay, like it says, these can be human and or other applications. Okay. Now, when we are creating use case diagrams, when we are drawing them, we need a few different things. The first thing that we need are functionalities. These are capabilities of the program, and they will be represented as use cases. So when we looked at the meal maker, what are the different things that you can do with a meal maker? Well, you can create side items, you can create meals, you can edit meals, you can create a meal calendar. Okay, so those functionalities would be represented as use cases. Okay, because those are different situations or cases under which an actor would use the application. Okay, so that's the first thing. We need use cases. Those are going to be represented as like rounded rectangles or rectangles where each different functionality of the system is represented as a rounded rectangle. And we'll look at an example here in just a minute. All right, so that's the first thing. Functionalities of the application. Second thing, actors. These are different entities that can interact with the system. Now, sometimes you will only have a single actor. Most of the time in a game setting, if you're creating a game, you're only going to have a single actor. This is the user playing the game. But think about, we might have some sort of employee tracking software that keeps track of all of the employees that work in the system. And when you go to, well, let's do this for example. My kids and I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And where we go, there is a check-in system. And so when you walk into the front desk, there are 2 iPads set up, and you go and you type in your name, and it'll pull up a list of classes for that day. And then you'll say, okay, I'm here for this class, and then you're done. And so that is one way in which an actor interacts with a system. And so what we have there is the functionality would be checking in, okay? And the actors would be members, we'll say. So a member can check in. That would be one use case, okay? So checking in is a use case, and the actor associated with that use case would be a member. But before we can do that, somebody else has to go in and add the individual members to the system, okay? And so we would have another functionality called add user or add member, but a regular member can't add themselves to the system. You would need some sort of administrator or mod or something like that to add the member to the system. Okay, so that would be a separate use case. And so we would have something that looked similar to this. Okay, so we've got, I'm just going to draw something right here. We'll look at one in just a second. But I'll do one over here in the margins. Okay, so you kind of define the area like that. And then I'm going to do two separate ones here. And so here we have check in, and here we have add member. Okay. And then on the outside, we have our actors. Okay, sorry, I heard something out there. And so we'll call this our admin, and we'll call this our member. Okay, so members can check in. Okay, administrators can add members. And so these functionalities right here, let me do it this way. Let's do grief. Okay, so these functionalities are represented by these right here. Okay, again, those are features or things you can do inside of the application. Okay, and then we have actors. Let's get a different color. Actors are entities that interact with those use cases, those functionalities. Okay, does that make sense? Any questions on this? Has my mic been off the whole time? Is everybody sleeping? Okay, just making sure. Maybe I'm sleeping. Sometimes it's unnerving to teach like this because it's literally just me talking to a screen, and I have no idea if anyone's on the other end listening. And just picture you guys like conked out right in front of your computer. But certainly none of you would do that. Good talk. Good talk. All right, so let's move on. The final thing that you need is the relationship among the actors and use cases. And those were those lines that we drew to show which actor can interact with which use case. Okay. So here's a sample. Can I make this bigger? Now, this is a very complicated example. I just want to kind of show you what a full one looks like. But this is, again, just a sample one. It's a banking system, and you've got 4 different actors. Okay, so you have the bank engineer that maintains the equipment, it maintains ATM, which includes maintaining equipment. And we'll look at what these includes mean in a little bit. but we'll talk about that in a minute. And then you have bank officials that can go in and reload the ATM, whereas the engineers are more responsible for fixing it or maintaining it. You have customers that can use an ATM, and ATMs also have to interact with the general or the central computer. And so this kind of shows the relationship between a really complex system. And here's what I want you guys to understand. There is some flexibility. There is some subjectivity with regards to how you set up these diagrams. Okay. Don't be overly stressed about, oh, did I set that up exactly right? Excuse me. Did I use the proper notation? Yes, that sort of stuff is important, but it's more like rough guidelines. Remember, the entire purpose of all of this is to make a complex system easier to understand. And so create these documents with that in mind. Okay, you want to represent your system in an easy to read document. And creating these documents shouldn't be more difficult than creating the code for the application. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. This is a very complex example, so don't be stressed out by this one. We're going to look at some more basic examples here in just a second, but I do want to cover a couple additional terms and aspects of these use case diagrams. Okay, so we have an order management system here, and here we have a use case diagram that represents that. So externally, we have a customer. This is our actor, and a customer can place an order. As it says, these are the use cases. And we saw up here above the idea of include, where this is kind of a modifier that gets added to the relationship between one use case and another. And here we see a second type called extends. Okay, and so you have two different ones. It can either be include or extends, or it could be none of those. It just depends. And those specify a particular type of relationship between use cases. Okay, and you can see right here, notice the use of extends and includes. Okay, and as it says here, what we are doing is we are extending the relationship between the actor and the use case. It kind of further defines the way in which an actor interacts with the use case. Okay, and let's take a look at what those two are. So includes is a reuse of functionality. Okay, the included functionality is used or could be used elsewhere in the system. Okay, so as that says, we are focused on a reuse of functionality. So something that is already used somewhere else can be tacked on or added here. Okay. And notice this says it denotes a dependency on another use case. So if we look at this example above here, we have order and special order and normal order. So an order extends special order. Special order extends order, and normal order extends order. And so the type of order that a customer places will be one of the two. Okay, and like it says here, notice the dependency. Like you can't have a special order that's not an order, and you can't have a normal order that's not an order. It's almost like an inheritance setup. We are reusing part of the functionality that exists in order. We are reusing that here as well. Okay. Contrast that with extends. Extends adds, not reuses functionality. Okay, so we are adding on to functionality that exists already. That's why what we see here is extends and not includes. Okay, and we'll look at the includes example up above in just a second. So what we are doing here, like I said, a special order extends order. Okay, so we are adding functionality to order. So whatever is normally done in this use case, we're going to do that. And then we are going to add on top of that whatever is needed for a special order or whatever is needed for a normal order. Okay, so you use extends in a situation where you always do one thing, and then we are going to add on something else depending on what maybe some specifics to whatever it is that they are doing. Okay. Again, that's different from including, which is a reuse of functionality. Okay, so we have some sort of dependency situation. We'll look at a couple more examples in just a little bit, and you'll get a better idea of the use of extends and includes. You don't always have to use them. Not every relationship within a use case is going to be extends or includes, but there are some situations where those are warranted. Okay. So this is a use case diagram, but there's also one other component that a use case diagram needs, and those are descriptions. Okay. So once your use case diagram is drawn, so once you have the actors drawn, once you have the use cases drawn, and once you have the interactions, which is the lines connecting them drawn, the final thing to do is to write a written description of the diagram. Okay, and you separate it into individual use case and actors. And so the way this works is you essentially write out a series of sentences that explains what the diagram represents. So a customer places an order, and the order is either a special order or a normal order. Okay, where normal order and special order extend order. Okay, so you essentially describe in written language, in sentence form, what the diagram represents. Okay, and the combination of the use case drawing and the use case description is what constitutes a complete use case diagram. This is what you're going to turn in. Okay, so this is your, so if we go back to modules, where you have milestone 3, this class diagram, I'm sorry, no, milestone 2, use case diagram. This is what you're going to turn in. You're going to return in a requirements document and a use case diagram, 2 different things. Okay, we'll talk about the requirements document in just a little bit. The use case diagram and description, what we just described is what you're going to turn in for that. Okay, it is a complete drawing showing the actors, the use cases, and the interactions, and it is the use case description, which lists and describe the drawing. Okay, questions on that? And we're going to do lots more with use case. Don't think we're done with it, but I just wanted to make you aware of what it is that you need to be focused on for your milestone. Okay, so let's do this right here. Where are requirements? There. Where do we talk about? I didn't see requirements in. Okay. That's because we did it here. So let me go back. 2 things. So I'm under modules, or you can go under assignments, either way. And for your milestone 2, okay, so everybody turned in milestone 1, great. Milestone 2, you need 2 things. Okay, your milestone 2 is made up of 2 parts. The first is a requirements document. The second is the use case diagram and description. So we are doing this today. We're going over what a use case diagram is and how to create one and all that sort of stuff. This we have already done before. Okay, and I didn't see this in the topic outliner, so I want to make sure we covered this before. We have already covered this, and the requirements document is in module or topic 3, okay, where we do the SDLC and system analysis. And so we're going to revisit that real quick. This is where we talked about the different methods for creating, waterfall, agile, all that sort of stuff. In system analysis, so in part 2, you get to the point where you are defining requirements. Okay, and this is the requirements document. This is what you are going to be doing. This is part 1. Let me switch back to this. This is part 1 of what you're turning in for milestone 2. Okay, you need a requirements document. So the first thing that you need in your requirements document is a rationale for why the system is needed. So what problem does this system, does this application address? Okay, so is it helping you keep track of your employees? Is it helping you figure out what clothes you have in your closet? Is it help you plan out what meals you're going to eat that month? Whatever it is, explain what problem this application is addressing. Why is this system needed? And talk about who it's specifically meant for. Is it meant for small businesses? Is it meant for families? Is it meant for people that have messy closets? Whatever it is, that's what goes into the first part of a requirements document. Okay. The second thing that you need is a description of the system. This is a bird's eye view description of what the system does, which is kind of a bridge between the rationale and the requirements. Okay, so the description essentially goes over briefly the way in which a user will interact with the system, how they will use it, what functions it will include, all of the stuff that you can do with it. Okay, and again, if you're writing an application and someone said, oh, what are you doing your program on? And you describe it to them, that's essentially what you're doing here. Okay, so talk about why it's needed and what problem it solves. Then you give a description of the system. And the final thing that you do in the requirements document is you list and explain both the functional and non-functional requirements. Okay, and the functional and non-functional requirements are outlined here in topic 3 and part 2. Okay, so when we talk about system analysis, we say defining the requirements. Okay, and so there are 2 types of requirements. And this is a review. We've gone over this already, but I wanted to touch base on it because you guys should be thinking about this now for your second milestone. The first are functional requirements. Those are functions that the system must perform. So those are specific things that the system has to do. Okay, so functional requirements describe what the system has to do. On the other hand, you have non-functional requirements, and these are related to usability, sustainability. So does the system have to be able to accommodate people who are colorblind? Okay, and that would be kind of under the UI formats, or the usability. Does the application need to be able to have like a deaf mode, to where if the user is hearing impaired or can't hear, there are some sort of other notifications that would replace sound or something like that? Does the application need to be able to run at a certain frame rate? Does the application need to be under a certain size? Okay, so it can't be bigger than 1 gigabyte or something like that. Does it have to do with, okay, we can't have external files, save files that are larger than a certain thing? Okay, does it need to be able to have certain security measures? Okay, so the information that we are putting into the system or writing to the system has to be encrypted. Like, so are we dealing with medical records that need to be in more security than just plain text? Okay, so all of those things that describe how things are done would be non-functional requirements. Okay, and for the most part, for the programs that you guys are creating, you're going to have rather limited non-functional requirements. The more complex and official and widely used an application is, the more non-functional requirements they're going to be, because then you have to deal with people interacting with either the content of the application or stuff the application produces or the application itself in a way that is not how the developer intended. Okay, and so that's where a lot of these non-functional requirements come into play. You're fine. And so that's kind of the separation of the two. You have functional requirements and non-functional requirements. And again, these are some, if you want to go back and listen to the topic outline when we went over these the first time to get kind of a refresher for that. But that is where you are going to list and explain the functional and non-functional requirements of the system. So what is the system doing? And are there any parameters associated with how the system has to do it? Okay, the first would be functional, the second would be non-functional. So all of that combined together gives you your requirements document. The rationale, the description, and the list of the requirements constitutes the requirements document. That is part one of your milestone. The second part is going to be the creation of the use case diagram for your system. Okay. Questions on that? We're going to get back to use case diagrams. We're going to do a complete one from start to finish so you can see how they're created. But that's, I wanted to cover in detail what you needed for milestone 2. And here's a rubric for how it's graded. Try to be as transparent as possible so that there are no confusions. Okay, so that takes us back to this. Go away. All right, so we are down here. So sample use case diagram, online referral system. So what this is this is an application that a school would use, high school, middle school, elementary school, where instead of a traditional referral system, they would use this online system. All right. And everybody know what referrals are? Anybody not know what a referral is? It's not like a letter of recommendation. Okay. So a referral is when a student gets written up for doing something that they shouldn't be doing. So maybe they aren't listening to the teacher, maybe they're being super disrespectful, maybe they, I don't know, lit a stink bomb in the hallway bathroom, whatever it is that they do, all of the things that high school, middle school, and elementary school students do that they shouldn't do, that they get written up for and sent to the principal. That's what a referral is. So the referral is the paperwork that gets filled out that accompanies the behavior that got them in trouble. Okay. So when a teacher has an issue with a student and they need to write up that student, they will write a referral to notify the administrators that some sort of bad behavior has taken place and it needs to be addressed. Some sort of consequence or punishment needs to be issued, and the referral contains all of the written description of what happened and all of the information that an administrator would need in order to deal with the situation. Okay, that's what a referral is. Traditionally, these systems are on paper. Okay, so teachers will fill out a form, send it to the office, and then a day or two later, a student will get called to the office and they'll have to deal with what happened. Okay, that's typically how it works. Okay? Maybe the students were fighting. I mean, there's lots of different things. Certainly none of you were ever written up when you were younger. You plead the fifth. Okay. That's good. So first thing that we're going to do is let's look at the requirements of the system. Number one, teachers must be able to create and print referrals for students who break the rules. Okay, pretty basic. All right, that's kind of the essence of what writing a student up means. Create and print referrals for students who break the rules. Number two, teachers and administrators must be able to view a list of all referrals created. Okay, so now we need to, or we're made aware that there's some sort of database of referrals that have been created, and both teachers and administrators need to be able, excuse me, to view the list. Okay, number 3, administrators must be able to assign a consequence to referrals entered by a teacher. Okay, so we're kind of seeing a breakdown of actors and use cases here, which is essentially the purpose of listing out these requirements. It basically tells you exactly what you need to do. Okay. Number 4, when an administrator processes a referral, it automatically notifies the teacher of the consequence. Okay. So that's step 1. Identify the requirements. This is what the system has to do. These 4 things. Okay. Questions on step 1? Okay. These steps, how I've got this broken down, is a good way for you to do it as well. So when you are creating this for your milestone 2, and you are doing this for your application, follow these same steps. Okay, it'll make it easier for you. All right, so step 2, we've already identified what the system needs to do. Now let's talk about the functionalities. Okay, and again, we didn't break these down into functional and non-functional requirements. These are all functional requirements. Okay, and what you should do when you are doing this is you should specify whether a requirement is functional or non-functional. Okay, so these would all be functional. If we said, for example, that we need some sort of security for the database where this is stored, so that it has at least mild levels of cybersecurity protection from outside attacks or whatever, that would be a non-functional requirement. We don't have that specified here, just for simplicity. So we've identified the requirements. Now we're going to identify the functionalities. These are the actual use cases. So create referral. And again, notice all of these are written in verb tense. Okay, so these are all verbs. These are all actions. Use cases are functions. They are functionalities that the system can do. Okay, so the system needs to be able to create referrals. You need to be able to print referrals. You need to be able to view a list of all the referrals. You need to be able to assign consequences, and you need to be able to notify teachers. These come directly from here. Okay, the other reason we have 5 here and 4 here is because here we have create and print all in one, and we separate the 2 here as they should be separated. Okay, you want to make things as modular as possible. So we've identified the requirements, we've identified the functionalities. Now we need to identify the actors. These are the entities that interact with the system. And so we have teachers. We'll get to the drawing in just a second. We have teachers, we have administrators, and we have an email system. And again, these actors are derived by reading and understanding the requirements. We have teachers, administrators, automatically notifies the teacher of the consequence. Okay, well, how does it automatically notify? Well, we have an email system. Okay, so we've done the requirements, we've done the functionalities, we've done the actors. If you go way back up to the original part, use case diagrams need 3 things. We need the use cases or the functionalities, we need the actors, and then we need the relationships between the 2. Essentially, this is who can do what. How do the actors interact with the use cases? Okay, because we know that not everybody can do everything. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Let's start with teachers. Teachers can create referrals. Okay, and if we saw that right here, teachers must be able to create, excuse me, and print referrals for students who break the rules. So we have teachers can create, teachers can also print referrals. Notice here we have the includes. Okay, includes means when you create a referral, we are going to reuse this print referral functionality that exists already. Okay, and again, that's what this includes mean. If you go back up to the description here, includes is a reuse of a functionality. So essentially, when one thing happens and you also are doing a second action, you're going to use includes when that second action can also be interacted with separately. And so what we have here is a teacher can create a referral. When they create a referral, it's going to automatically include printing it. Okay, but a teacher can also later go in and reprint it if they wanted to. So the printing and the creating of a referral are separate. They're separate actions, but when you create it, it automatically includes printing a referral. So we're reusing the functionality that exists here as a part of creating the referral. That's what the includes mean. Includes means, okay? Whereas extends is a way of specializing or adding on to an action that already exists, okay? There's no, I'm trying to think of, a customer is not going to go straight into special order. They would have to go into order first, and then special order extends. This is more like an inheritance relationship, where this is more like a tacking on relationship. Okay, if that makes sense. Think of it this way. If you have a situation where you have two separate use cases, and the interaction of one use case automatically includes the use of a second use case, and the second use case can be interacted with individually, you're going to use includes. If the second use case cannot be interacted with individually, it's going to be extends. And so if you are further defining the way in which one use case operates, then that's going to be extends. Okay, if you're simply saying we also want to do this thing, then that's going to be includes. All right, questions on those two? Okay, so back to this particular example. A teacher can create a referral, which automatically includes printing a referral. Teacher can also simply go back into the system and print a referral. Finally, a teacher can view the list. View list is a list of all of the referrals that have been created, okay, even from other teachers. Okay, so this is the idea behind that, is that teachers can see if any other of their coworkers have had any issues with this particular student, or if the particular student that they're having issues with has gotten in trouble in other areas. Okay. Administrators can view the same list that the teachers can view, but the way in which they interact with that list is different. Okay, they can view the list and they can also assign consequences. And this is really important. Okay, hear me on this. I said this before, there is some gray area associated with how these diagrams are drawn. Okay, and what I mean by that is specifically how these lines connect the entities in the system. There is some subjectivity associated with it. And so you could make the argument that you can't assign a consequence without first viewing the list. And so you could say, well, we should really have a line here with includes You can make the argument for a couple different things when you look at this. What I want you to understand is, as long as you can make a rational and logical description and justification for the interactions that you specify in the drawing, it's fine. Okay. As long as your drawing doesn't misrepresent what your system is doing, it's fine. But know that there is some subjectivity associated with it, and there can be multiple correct ways to draw these diagrams. So, and I get this every semester, people get super stressed out about whether or not they have it perfect. And what you need to do is look at the diagram and make sure the diagram accurately represents what your system does. Okay, but know that there is a little bit of wiggle room. Does that make sense? Okay, so administrators can view lists. They can also assign a consequence. Okay, when they assign a consequence, that's going to automatically includes, or it's going to automatically include notifying the teacher. Okay, and how is the teacher notified? Well, that's the email system that we have. All right, so it's a built-in email system that, I mean, depending on how the platform is set up, that would automatically notify the teacher. Okay. Questions on this example? Okay, well, that wraps up use case diagrams. Remember, in addition to the drawing, you also need a written description. Essentially, you need a sentence for each line that exists in this. So you would need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things that you need to describe. An example would be like this. You would say, teachers can create referrals, which automatically includes printing a referral. Teachers can also go in and print referrals that have already been created. Okay. Teachers can view the list of all of the referrals that have been created. You could also modify that to say teachers and administrators can view the list of all of the referrals that have been created, or you could keep it 2 separate sentences. It doesn't matter. Okay. Say administrators can assign consequences for referrals that have been created, which includes notifying the teacher of the consequence. The email system is responsible for notifying the teacher when that happens. And that's it. Okay. All that together constitutes your use case diagram for your system. That plus the requirements document as defined here and here. So you need the rationale, you need a description, and you need a list of functional, non-functional requirements. That makes up your requirements document. Okay. So try to be, like I said before, transparent as possible. Put out the requirements, specifically what we're looking for, so that there's no questions or that sort of thing. But if there are, we're happy to help. Okay. Questions for me?